Hey, I'm Shaun Donovan, and I'm running for mayor of New York City. We all know that climate change is a global issue, but cities are on the front line. And when I'm elected, New York City will once again be the leading city on climate change in the world. We're going to cut our emissions to net zero by mid-century, and we're going to protect all New Yorkers from extreme weather, whether that's extreme storms, increasing rains, or the heat waves that we're increasingly seeing around our city. And how are we going to do that? Well, first and foremost, we're going to make sure that we once again partner with the rest of the country and the rest of the world to be a leader again on climate change. My 6,000-word climate plan, it's here in my plan for New York City. It's been endorsed by Gina McCarthy. No other candidate has the relationships and the knowledge of how to build partnerships in Albany, in Washington, and across this country with other mayors to make sure that New York City is a leader again on climate change. We're also going to make sure that we lead in every area. And let me just give you one example. On buildings, our biggest source of emissions. Not only am I going to accelerate implementation of Local Law 97, get the tools and resources like PACE to every building that needs it, but we're also going to lead with our public buildings. We're going to make sure that public housing is a model around the world for sustainable green housing. And we're going to make sure that not only our public buildings, but every building gets to stop using fossil fuels within the next decade. That's going to be key to all of our plans, is leading on buildings. The other thing we're going to lead with is environmental justice. I'm going to make sure within the first 100 days of a Donovan administration, we issue an all-of-government executive order on environmental justice. We're going to increase the use of social vulnerability mapping and all kinds of other tools to really know where the impacts are the greatest and where we need to focus our resources. And I'm going to create real accountability by appointing the first ever chief equity officer in the history of this city, reporting directly to me. Every agency will be accountable to those goals on environmental justice, and we will actually make sure that climate change no longer disproportionately devastates our communities of color. So this question really does begin with our streets, the thing the mayor controls, and we got to start with owning the fact that we're a 21st century city with 20th century streets. So we need to reimagine our streets, not only make our open streets program permanent, but actually ensure that we're bringing new modes of transit and mobility to our city in a safe and environmentally friendly way. What does that mean? Well, that means certainly dedicated lanes for bus rapid transit, but it also means protected lanes for bikes and other modes of micro-mobility. It also means ensuring that all of those buses move quickly through our city with traffic signaling priority. We also need to make every single public vehicle an EV. We need to have charging stations everywhere so it's easier for New Yorkers. We've got to lead with our MTA buses, which I would make sure we're all electric, and our school buses as well. And guess what? They can also serve in our next crisis, whether it's the next hurricane or other climate disaster. They can be our community hubs, ensuring that everyone has power from those electric cells. So we're going to be innovative. We're going to lead the city, this city into the future, and we're going to be the leading climate city in the world once again. Well, for me, this commitment begins at home. I'm married to a landscape architect who's designed public parks and gardens all over this city and across the country. And I know that, especially in this moment where getting outside is so important and so special, that every New Yorker has to have access to a park. I also know that New York City has the least green space per person of any city in the country. And that has to change, especially for our communities, Black and brown communities, disadvantaged communities that have been left behind for too long. You know, there are over 1 million people in the city of New York that don't have a park within 10 minutes walk of their home. That has to change, and I'm going to make sure it changes. I'm going to invest in parks at a scale we've never seen, and it's not just building them, but maintaining them in good condition as well. I would also make sure that other innovative public-private partnerships are going not only to the few, but to all our parks around the city by sharing the wealth, ensuring that we have equitable funding for parks across the city. Well, first, when we reimagine our streets and bring them into the 21st century, we're going to make sure that that includes our sanitation, to collect it differently, to make it much easier to recycle, to put infrastructure across this city, especially in places that have too often been left behind, like public housing. I would also make sure that we're no longer following other cities where we know New York only recycles about 1/5 of its waste, when other cities like San Francisco and Seattle are 3 times that level. We've got to lead the country in recycling, and we're going to do that by bringing back organics recycling and making sure it works everywhere. And we're going to have to get to our construction waste. About half of our waste in this city comes from construction, and so I would implement for the first time ever a serious construction waste recycling program to ensure that we're really leading the country again in recycling, to ensure that we're leading the country and the world in recycling. Well, certainly we have to begin with the environmental justice executive order that I would put in place in my first 100 days. I would substantially increase the amount of work we're doing to measure the real impacts in communities around the country, social vulnerability mapping, and all these other tools that other places around the country are using, but we're not using here in New York City nearly enough. But I would go further than that. I would reorient the way we plan the city around what I call 15-minute neighborhoods. What's a 15-minute neighborhood? Well, if you live in a wealthy neighborhood in New York, you know what it is. Within 15 minutes of your front door, you have everything you need to live a life of opportunity. A great school for your kids, a great job that sustains your family, or transportation that gets you there quickly. But you also have the healthcare and all of the other advantages that you need. And what we know is the environmental impacts that have led to disproportionate death rates from COVID in Black and brown communities are rooted in environmental justice inequities. So when I implement the 15-minute neighborhood, we're going to ensure not just that we're investing in fresh food, in parks, in all of the things that make for healthy neighborhoods everywhere in this city. We're also going to be looking at making sure that we're not putting our peaker plants and other environmental hazards into Black and brown communities. We're going to be getting rid of those peaker plants, and we're going to be ensuring that every community is doing its fair share around the risks in this city. That's how we're going to make it fair. And my chief equity officer is going to ensure that every agency is measured, is monitored, and every agency is going to be living up to that commitment to 15-minute neighborhoods. Well, New Yorkers should trust that I'm going to do this because I have led on lead throughout my entire career. When I came in as housing commissioner, I went to work implementing Local Law 1, the most far-reaching lead paint law in the country. When I was HUD secretary for President Obama, I made sure that our Healthy Homes initiative dramatically improved the health and wellness of our children all around the city and all around the country. And I partnered with the EPA, our health officials, to make sure that we were raising standards as well. But here's the thing. It isn't just about implementation and enforcement of Local Law 1 in New York. It's also about making sure that every time the city is in an apartment, whether it's our nurse-family partnership, visiting expecting mothers at home, whether it's the work we're doing with our housing inspections to look at other challenges in our housing, every time we ought to make sure that we're communicating in the right language, in the right way with those residents of New York City, making sure we're looking for lead paint hazards, and making sure we're using every possible chance where we communicate with New Yorkers to inform them about the hazards, ask them whether there are any hazards in their home, and make sure we're directing resources proactively to where this is a problem. We are at a New Deal moment right now in this country. We have the opportunity not just with $2 trillion of federal investment to rebuild from COVID, but a $3 trillion infrastructure plan that's being discussed in Washington right now. We have the opportunity to make an investment in green infrastructure, in bringing sustainability to the city at like no time in our history. And we need a mayor who understands how to build those partnerships, to bring those resources. I'm the only candidate in this race who's worked side by side with President Biden, Vice President Harris, through the worst crises our city and our country have faced. And I'm the only one who knows how to go to work in the federal budget, because I was budget director for President Obama, to make sure that New York is getting its fair share of those resources. Then what we need to do is make sure we're putting that money to work, making New York the greenest, most sustainable city on earth, and to do it, creating jobs for those who are too often left behind. I would build a Green Climate Corps, modeled on programs we started in the Obama administration, that would put our young people to work, create apprenticeships and pre-apprenticeships. What would they do? They would build solar on the rooftops of our public housing. They would make sure that all of the wind turbines that are going to be out off the coast of Long Island are assembled, built, and maintained by New Yorkers with a port here in our city. There's so many opportunities for us to build the green jobs of the future. We need a green climate accelerator that will bring that technology, make this city the leading green tech city in the world, and ensure that we're training every New Yorker, particularly those who are too often left behind, our Black and brown young people, our disadvantaged kids, make sure that they can take those jobs of the future and bring New York City into the 21st century as the leading climate city in the world. I gotta say, this is an easy one for me. It's Brooklyn Bridge Park, just a few minutes walk from our home. And why? Because my wife is a landscape architect who helped design it. And so we walk through that park. She knows the names of every one of the plants. She has nicknames for them. It feels like home to us. And we love running, walking, biking, and everything in between in Brooklyn Bridge Park. Well, as a real New Yorker, I measure the different phases of my life from the subway lines that I take during those periods. As a kid, I rode the 4, 5, and 6 all the time. When I was raising my kids on Bergen Street, the F train was our lifeline in the city, whether it was heading into the city or going to Coney Island to the aquarium or to swim on the beach. And now it's the A and the C, right there in downtown Brooklyn, that gets me everywhere I need to go. I do, and I'm proud to say my reusable water bottle is a 2020 bottle. 2020 is my younger son's rock band, and I'm a proud roadie, groupie for their band. I'm married to a landscape architect. Of course I compost at home. Well, as a New Yorker who grew up riding bikes, learned to ride a bike on the streets of this city, I pretty much love biking anywhere, but my current favorite is the route I do through Prospect Park, down Ocean Parkway, out to Coney Island, back along the water under the Verrazano Bridge, ending up at the pier in Red Hook to watch the sun come down. That is the best way to end a beautiful day.